My first game against Death Guard. So I'm fielding Hive Fleet Behemoth for +1 strength on the charge, and I swapped the re-rolling the charge for Monster Obsec. I figure I'll get the charge from the strat Shard Lure. I have an Exocrine, and I will camp that big boy on the backfield objective and sniper across the board. It has voracious ammunition to add a few mortal wounds. A 3 Tyranid warrior unit with Death Spitters and Bone Swords, and 1 Venom Cannon to run around and snag objectives, or just help out, or intercept incoming threats. 3 Venom Thrope to provide -1 to hit to the 3 Tyrant Guard with Adrenal Glands that are accompanying a Hive Tyrant with Bone Sword and Lash Whip, and the Relic of Shard Gullet, and the trait Adaptive Biology for basically permanent catalyst. 3 Zoanthropes to float forward in the wake of the spear tip and channel their smites up the chain. A Neurothrope with Resonance Barb and Synaptic Tendrils so it can share Warp Siphon twice while keeping the +2 to cast for itself. A Screamer Killer with Dermic Symbiosis for a 4-up invuln save. It has Adrenal Glands to speed it up and Spore Cysts for -1 to shoot it. A main block of 6 Tyranid warriors with the same weapons as the others, but these have Adrenal Glands and Toxin Sacs. A Prime behind them with a Venom Cannon, and it has the Warlord trait of Direct Guidance to give the warriors +1 to hit, and its Alpha Warrior will also give the warriors re-rolling wound rolls of 1. Then there's a Tervagon with 23 Fleshborer Termagants, and finally a Morlock lurking somewhere underground. Secondaries are Cranial Feasting, Psychic Interrogation, and Engage on all fronts. The Death Guard have Terminators and Plague Marines and Mortarion and Typhers, some Bell Dudes and Sergeants, and 2 chunks of Poxwalkers. Okay, round 1. I activated the Tervagon Synaptic Imperative for +2 inches move. Round 2 was Guide Mind for a great missile barrage with everything now in range. Round 3 was Goaded to Slaughter for all those finally in melee. Round 4 was Psychic Augmentation to defend against all those mortals and puff up my Psychic. And round 5 was Warp Shielding for the invuln, now that everything was low on wounds or dead. First thing I learned? Death Guard are slow. And by slow, I mean slow. Turn 1, I advanced and was still well out of range for psychic and shooting. Only my cannon had the range, and I focused on the Terminators, and with the high damage, high AP, it did some decent damage. Most of the Death Guard have the -1 damage minimum of 1 thing. The Screamer Killer grabs a midfield objective and chucks out some Bioplasmic. Shard Gullet did some excellent damage on the Terminators. Strength 12, damage 5, AP -5 is perfect to get through all that armor, toughness, and damage reduction. The Venom Thrope engaged the Poxwalkers to stop them swamping my Guard and Tyrant, who attack the Shard Lure affected Terminators and successfully make the charge. Next thing I learned, Death Guard have this aura that lowers your toughness by 1, and each round the range of this aura increases. Also, they hit hard in melee. I mean, I'd heard that they do, I wasn't anticipating this level of bloody wrecking ball though. Poxwalkers can do a bunch of mortals, and any kills, they rise again and become Poxwalkers as well. I failed the cast for Catalyst on the Tyrant Guard, so they didn't last as long as I would have liked. But as soon as they went down, I got the Tyrant the hell out of there, so it could go back to blasting away with the Shard Gullet. The Screamer Killer was engaged by these things called Death Shroud Terminators. The Terminators have the Bodyguard rule, and this screwed me proper. Now, my Tervagon generated its freebie 10 Termagant unit to dump on the other rear objective, and it then advanced with all its little wee ones, so it could start throwing Psychic Interrogation up the chain each round. The Plague Marines behind the Bodyguards, well, they used a strat called Cloud of Flies. It can be expensive, 2 CP, 4 CP for Terminators, and unless they are the closest unit, they can't be shot at, thus saving them from Venom Cannon and Shard Gullet and Bioplasmic Cannon fire. Now, I can't target Mortarion, who was just a smidge further away from my Termagants because of the Bodyguards. but I can't target the bodyguards because they are engaged with the Screamer Killer, and I can't fire at a unit engaged with my bugs, but there were other Marines I could target. So, a good one here. Plague Marines are toughness 5, Flesh Borers are strength 5, but with Scorch Bugs, the Flesh Borers get an extra point of strength, so those 20 plus shots did a lot better than expected, especially because the Marines are not going to spend 2 command points to give them flies to block measly Termagant fire. The remnants of a Poxwalker unit were sick of the Zoanthropes rolling 3d6 and choosing the best and adding 3 for the psychic test for a few super smites, each doing an extra 3 mortal wounds. So they used a strat, the Dead Walk Again. On a 3-up, a dead model is returned, and they use this to place a Poxwalker within coherency of the front line, then the next forward of that one, and the next forward of that, and on and on and on to chain them quickly along the side of the table, far quicker than they could ever have hoped to advance, and it gets them right up close to the Zoanthropes so they could charge and engage. Sneaky grody zombies! With direct guidance and guide mind, my main Tyranid force unleashed some awesome volleys, but now it's time to get stuck in. They engaged Mortarion, but not before I got another Shard Gullet shot into him. Now, whenever I damaged Mortarion, nasty stuff came gushing out, and the unit engaged with him took mortal wounds. This started whittling down my warriors, but allowed the Neurothrope to take Warp Siphon, give the other one to the Hive Tyrant, and together they chucked smites into him and a Psychic Scream for good measure. This was also the turn with Psychic Augmentation up, for an extra +1 on the cast and ignoring mortals on a 5+, which I'm sure Mortarion will be chucking around. When the Hive Tyrant charged him, Trampling Charge did enough mortal wounds to kill him outright, before I even got a bone sword into Nurgle's best boy. Anywho, Neuroparasite was excellent on the Poxwalkers, their large numbers assured the max 6 mortal wounds. Rapid Regeneration was great for keeping the Screamer Killer on the objective, which it held for the entire game. But here's something I really need to watch out for. Poxwalkers love hordes. 3 Poxwalkers engaged my 23 Termagants. It was a different unit, so the Dead Walk Again strat restored 5 of them, and they used Mutant Strain to get them a mortal wound on a 6. And even with Endless Swarm and the Tervagorn restoring them, they started killing more than I could replace, and each kill became a new Poxwalker. I mean, look at this, from 3 to this. That's nasty stuff. So, there's no doubt a ton more stuff they can chuck out and baffle me with and I need to learn, but these are the takeaways from my first face-off against the Death Guard. So, I know to keep hordes away from Poxwalkers and use small units with lots of attacks. Turns out the Venom Throats were perfect. They chopped up a ton of them and only gave them 3 walkers for it. Mortarion and Terminators and characters. Shard Gullet and Exocrine Fire were amazing. And as many smites as you can into Mortarion and buff them to try and get those super smites. Psychic Screams to try and erase some of his psychic powers as well. But most of all, hold back and use ranged weapons. Death Guard have very little to speed them up, so as they advance, remember...